All right, everyone. Happy Friday, first and foremost. Welcome to the 11th tasting of Beauj 2025. It is also the last recording of Beauj 2025. The last one next week will be a live tasting with the Côte de Brouilly. So here we are. We're getting to the end, 11th week. So let's get to it. We're tasting this. I like this label. We're tasting this guy or this gal today. 2023 Domaine Le Roche Bleu La Croquante Brouilly is what we're tasting today. You all have map. You all have access to that Google Drive, but you all know where Beaujolais is by this point. And now, if you're looking at the Beaujolais region map, you see the very last two, the Brouilly and Côte de Brouilly. Brouilly being that orange part, and the Côte de Brouilly being an appellation within an appellation. So Côte de Brouilly is a very specific, smaller sub section within Brouilly. Côte means like a slope in French. So there's a Mont Brouilly, which is the mountain that kind of shoots up in the middle of a brewery. And then it gives a lot of this kind of blue schist rocks, volcanic soil that kind of comes up there. And that's what makes Côte de Brouilly very different, as opposed to Brouilly, which is the kind of the lower elevation part of that region. So, in my opinion, it is so the Beaujolais Brouilly being the southernmost and largest of the 10 crews. But doing this side by side, week after week, tasting Brouilly and Côte de Brouilly, in my opinion, is particularly really fun. Probably next to tasting Moulin Avant and Fleury next to each other, because that's also neighboring crews, but stylistically they're very different, right? Like if you remember Fleury, hence the name Fleury, is very like floral, aromatic, pretty. And Moulin Avant is this like tannic, powerful, burly, muscular. So seeing that kind of difference, like a dramatic difference within two crews that are neighboring each other, it's the same thing here, Brouilly and Côte de Brouilly. And to me, that difference is even more stark here. And it's also a really good case study to study kind of direct results of soil types as well as elevation, what they do to the resulting wines. And that's essentially what makes Côte de Brouilly and Brouilly different. Côte de Brouilly is higher up in elevation because it's a mountain that shoots up, as well as the soil type here changes from granite and clay in Brouilly to more of a volcanic and blue schist soil that exists in Côte de Brouilly. Always fun to do these last two parts. If you look at the map, there's a Brouilly soil map that you will all have an access to. So if you look at that map, right in the middle, you'll see that kind of a blank white spot in the middle of Brouilly. That's essentially Côte de Brouilly. That's the mountain that comes out, which we'll cover next week. Quite varied in soil type here in Brouilly, as you can see if you look at the soil map. Everything kind of on the south and western part is that pink granite that we've been talking about in Beaujolais, right? The colors are all kind of a salmon, pink, red over there. And then as you look on the east and south, the soil type is varied there. You see many different things, but that is much similar to kind of what happens in Beaujolais. So you get some alluvial soil here, but really you get more clay, which means that you're going to get clay and less minerality, clay and less rocks like granite or volcanic soil. So you get wines that are a lot more kind of quaffable, more drinkable, super approachable, rather than kind of a structured, tannic, very linear kind of a wines that we normally would expect from vines that are grown on a more minerally soil like granite or limestone or volcanic or whatnot. So in general, if you're going to compare the Brouilly to Côte de Brouilly is going to be darker. It's going to be more tannic. It's just going to be more structured, meaning there's more tannin, as opposed to Brouilly just tends to be, in general, again, there are outliers here, but in general tends to be a lot more quaffable, a lot more drinkable, a lot more approachable in youth. That's kind of the difference between the two. Côte de Brouilly is one of the longest aging. We'll talk more about that next week, but one of the most age-worthy it can last for a while because of the tannin and the acid that comes from being grown on a very infertile rocky soil, as opposed to Brouilly, where you get a lot more clay, and then you get a lot more fruit forward, less structure kind of wine. Almost all vineyards here in Brouilly are all east facing. Again, very good for sunlight exposure. Obviously not as good as south, but still east is much better than, say, north or west facing. If you look at the map, the pictures that I'm sending you, I'm also sending you a picture of soil samples between Brouilly and Côte de Brouilly, and you can kind of see it in that picture how different it is. Côte de Brouilly being just this kind of rocks in that little jar, and then Brouilly being much more crumblier. The actual particle or particulate size of the soil is much smaller. Again, it's a lot more granite and clay in Brouilly, and Côte de Brouilly becomes a lot of that blue schist and a volcanic rock that we're gonna talk about next week. So let's talk about who makes this wine. You'll get this picture. But Jonathan Buisson is the name of the winemaker. He actually runs the family domain with his wife Chloe. So a third generation producer located right here on the slopes of Montbrouilly, making really energetic. I've tasted both his brewery as well as Côte de Brouilly, but both of his wines have this really expressive kind of energetic purity running through it as a common thread. Obviously very different wines, but still the common kind of a theme that I found was that purity of the wine, which I really appreciated. The family domain began in 1967 when Chloe's grandparents, Annie and Louis Bassi, acquired a few hectares of vines. And they're really set out to kind of own their own estate vineyards as well as make wine from it, which was back in the 60s. It was not a common thing. Not many people owned their own vineyards, nor were they, especially small producers, that were not necessarily bottling their own wines. They were selling it off to these large cooperatives and whatnot, négociants. But Chloe's grandparents set out to kind of make their own wines and grow and make their own wines. Chloe's parents, Christian and Dominique, took over in 1993. You will get a picture of Christian, Dominique, Jonathan, and Chloe. They're kind of a family pic in their cellar, in the Google Drive as well, if you want to check that out. And they were the ones who kind of took the winery and then started exporting wines just outside of France. They got some. That's when their wines started coming to the States. That's when they started going to Great Britain and the rest of Europe. But then what we know of is now, really the fresh start came in 2017 when the young third generation Jonathan and Chloe took over the estate. And then they immediately started transforming the family domain to organic and natural winemaking, essentially, incorporating biodynamic, regenerative farming philosophy. From what I've researched, from what I've read, it seems like Jonathan and Chloe are big fucking hippies. But yeah, they also incorporate agroforestry, which is things like plant cover, hedges, planting trees within plots. The trees play a huge role. They believe that it's a huge tool to kind of increase biodiversity and also imbibe different nutrients and different things, different kind of a passageway for the plants. But anyways, I found this paragraph. I don't know if you will find this interesting, but I find it interesting. So I'm going to read it off to you. This is straight from their website. It says, the goal of what Jonathan and Chloe are deploying farming method, the regenerative and agroforestry farming method they're deploying in their vineyards, is the goal is to put the trees at the heart of the vineyard system to improve the quality of the soil, the environment, and fight climate change. The trees and hedges at the periphery of the vineyards also provide a quote-unquote highway for the animals and insects to connect to the forest at the top of the mountain, as well as find their way into his neighbor's vineyards that are connected to the same system. He utilized wild grasses in the vineyard to help with water retention and guard against erosion. The grasses also lower the temperature in the vineyards by an average of 10 degrees on the ground, which is pretty amazing. I didn't think about grasses necessarily for temperature control. But yeah, anyways, I found that pretty interesting. I don't know, I've heard that word agroforestry a few times, often, especially in the natural wine world, but I didn't really understand what I knew that it had to do with trees and all of that, but I've never seen anybody kind of put it as a way to describe it as a highway for animals and insects and to connect systems, which is pretty interesting. So anyways, I thought I would share that. Anyways, today, so they farm 10 hectares producing Côte de Brouilly and Brouilly, and the vineyards sit between the neighbors, and these names will sound familiar to you. Chateau Theven, which is one of our favorite producers, one of our favorite Côte de Brouilly producers that we feature a few times. And then Pierre Cotton, which is the producer that we featured last week. So yeah, their vineyards within very established, reputable estates within Côte de Brouilly and Brouilly. His vineyards were certified organic in 2021, and he does not use any chemicals in the vineyard or in the winery. The label, by the way, this very loud or eye-catching label, was actually created by Jonathan's good friend and artist Astrid Amadou. They tell a story of the personality and flavor progression of the different cuvées while celebrating women, as imagined by Astrid. Astrid apparently worked harvest at Domaine Roches Bleues in 2010 and 2011, and then she would make all these portraits of the harvest interns and grape pickers during her evenings there. So these were kind of inspired by all of her drawings, and on top of that, by the wines, what's inside the bottle, the wine that's inside the bottle. So each of their cuvées or bottlings have different labels that are all drawn by Astrid. They're all this kind of same motif. It's kind of fun. But anyways, yeah, there's that. All right, so what is this? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, in that Google Drive, I'll also include a picture of Mont Brouilly, so you'll kind of see this mountain that kind of shoots up in the middle of Brouilly. It doesn't look all that steep in that picture, but when you actually ever go there, it's actually quite steep. It just kind of shoots out of nowhere, and then it's a bit of a climb to get up there. But you also feel noticeable drop in temperature from the bottom of the mountain slope side going all the way to the top, which is also always fun to kind of notice and then see how that's reflected in the final style of the wine as well. Anyway, so what is this wine? This is a 40 to 6-year-old vine, all certified organic Gamay, grown on pink granite. 8 days of semi-carbonic maceration, then slow pressing on their family vertical press, spontaneous fermentation and temperature controlled stainless steel tanks, and then it gets racked off into a 50-year-old Fougera, which are the gigantic barrels. That's actually the Fougera is what the family, Christian, Dominique, Jonathan, and Chloe, they're standing in front of, if you look at that picture. So in those Fougeras, very traditional in this part of France. For additional 8 months, it gets aged in the Fougera, and then it gets bottled unfiltered, unfined, with just a little touch of sulfites is what we have. So, I mean, technically, he says he doesn't use, earlier I said, Jonathan doesn't use any chemicals in the vineyard or winery, but I mean, sulfites is a chemical. It's a naturally occurring substance, but it's nonetheless, it is a chemical. So I don't know if that's actually true. It definitely doesn't use anything in the field, but he uses a touch of sulfites. This is not a 001. Okay, let's get to tasting the wine. All right, appearance. I'm gonna call this one clear. For all intents and purposes, this is clear. I can tell this wine has not been filtered or fine, but definitely clear. Intensity, I'm gonna call this medium. I can kind of see the letters behind, but not super clearly. So I'm gonna call this medium intense colors of, and to me, this is like textbook ruby. No other observation, no sediments, no signs of bubbles, nothing like that. Cool. Nose. Sorry, give me 1 second. Here you go. Nose. Oh, first of all, this one is clean, this one is sound, and it smells fantastic. I love that. Yeah, okay. Intensity. Off of here, right? like this, pretty far off. I'm gonna call that medium plus, pretty expressive, right? Aromatic, expressive. And what do we get? I mean, to me, has very, like, there's no other place in the world, if I ever got this wine blind, that where I can go or where I would go, except for Beaujolais. I mean, this is Beaujolais in a glass right here. Semi-carbonic, that granitic fucking minerality just jumping out of the glass. The beautiful kind of a violet, that blue flower. There's, to me, the expression here is more black, darker fruit than it is red fruit. But it's like a cherry, more of like a black cherry, maybe some bramble. I do get some red fruit here as well, but to me it's like a black cherry is where my mind goes to more than that. But I do get a little bit of like red, like a red plum, red cherry too as well. But yeah, mostly, majority wise, it's black bramble, black cherry, black currant maybe, that kind of vibe here for me. Fruit here is really, really fresh, really ripe. I get both fresh and ripe fruit, as well as just a touch of that high tone candied, kind of artificial fruit aromas that we talk about. Nothing super herbal here, like for me. There's nothing green, nothing herbaceous. Maybe like a turn or two of pepper here, but really what I get is granitic, that minerality. This is granite just jumping out of the glass. Like, it smells like a crushed up granite, rock dust and sand, and then like if you just like threw it in my face, so that's like, this is what it would smell like, but ton of granite, for sure. Almost kind of like flinty, smoky, but like, yeah, to me this is like quintessential granite. No secondary, no tertiary, still very young, and we're talking about very much primary fruit driven, but really, really expressive, beautiful, ripe. That semi-carbonic high tone comes out, and just ton of that minerality coming through. Oftentimes with the Brouilly, it is not always that you're gonna get this much minerality, because sometimes, you know, it depends on where it's grown. West is a lot more granite, and then east and south is a lot more clay. So oftentimes if you get a producer that's sourcing their fruit from the east or southern side where there's more clay, you get a lot more fruit. And it also depends on the type of carbonic maceration that's done. Oftentimes I found Brouilly to be a lot more red fruit driven, but here you get a lot darker because, again, you're going into the more infertile rocky soil, also semi-carbonic, so you get a little bit darker fruit rather than red fruit, but nonetheless it still has that like immediate freshness, approachability. Like, this is not like a real, like, you don't need to sit here for hours, like, you know, thinking upon it kind of wine. Like, this, there's enough here. It's not just a, you know, glue juice, but there's it's also like a very cerebral kind of a wine, which is what I really like these days. All right, let's taste it. Palate. Hold on, I'm just gonna enjoy. Usually, that was my first sip of the day, and usually the first sip I just I use it to kind of like neutralize my palate. Yeah, I feel like everything just kind of, my calibration is all off without that first kind of like a resetting kind of a sip. So now I'll taste it. All right, this wine is dry, first of all, bone dry. Acidity, good acidity, not like screaming. I would probably call this medium, but higher than medium, lower than medium plus. Tannin. There's some tannin here, not nothing, but not super high, and it's not meant to be, right? It's Brouilly again. This is all semi-carbonic whole cluster. The whole point of doing that is to minimize phenolic extraction, including tannin. So you wouldn't expect a whole lot of it, but it's still there some. So I'm gonna call this like medium minus. lower in the medium, higher in the medium minus. But I'm gonna call this medium minus. If I was in exam setting, I'll call this medium minus. Alcohol seems right in line. I don't know, 13%. Yeah, 13%. There you go. So that's right in medium. Body. Yeah, just like lower end of medium, higher end of medium minus. I think I want to go with like medium minus on this. Like to me, doesn't have a whole lot of body, but yeah, I'm gonna call this about medium minus on the body. No mousse. Flavor intensity. To me, it's not as strong as on the nose. Like to me, this was really expressive on the nose. But on the palate, it seems a little more shy, but maybe it's just a matter of time. Also, now that I pour new fresh glass, pour into my glass, I get a little bit of dissolved CO2, which adds to that kind of crunch factor that we talk about. Like there's something very crunchy about this wine. So obviously not as like bright poppy red berry that we talk about. Nonetheless, just the texturally, just this wine is very crunchy. You know, it's just like it's got that good acid. It's got that little bit of dissolved CO2 pop. Fruit profile is not like deep and dark. It's just kind of like light on its feet. So yeah, even though it's you can. So what I'm trying to say is, you can have black fruit and still be crunchy. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and that dissolved CO2 definitely helps. What were we talking about? What are we on? Oh, body, medium minus. Flavor intensity, that's what it was. Yeah. Flavor intensity. I don't know. Medium, high in the medium, low in the medium plus. It doesn't seem as intense as it was on the nose. Probably will open up. But right now, I'm going to call this medium. So when you look at all the things we called out, I mean, I'm getting everything on the palate that I did on the nose, except for some of the textural thing. I get that granitic mineral tension, as well as the CO2, the dissolved CO2. Not enough to call it like, frizzante or sparkling, but it's just enough to give it a little tickle. But floral, violet, to me, this is that black cherry, bramble, red plum, both fresh as well as high tone. The fruit qualities is really ripe. Again, speaks volume about its farming. There's nothing underripe about this thing. No herbaceous, no herbal. Maybe like a touch of a spice, a pepper, and again, that granitic thing. I mean, to me, what I love about this wine is while it is this kind of a chuggable, crunchy, delicious kind of a bottling, but at the same time, it's got tannin, it's got layers, a textural component, as well as just ton of this minerality. It's not just a juice that you can pound it if you wanted to, but if you want to sit there and just kind of pick apart what's happening with different things, there's something else you can always find, which I really appreciate. And the amount of minerality of this thing on the backs of all that ripe fruit, black cherry, all of that, to have all that rock dust on top, it's beautiful. No secondary, no tertiary. Again, very, very much primary fruit driven wine. Length. Oh wow. Oh yeah, I get a lot of the red plum right now coming through. Yeah, starts off black fruit, red fruit, all the minerality. This goes. I'm gonna call this medium plus in length. Wow, I didn't expect the length to be that long, but yeah, it's got some length. All right, let's put it all together. I think this wine is very well balanced. There's nothing here that sticks out so much. Everything seems very harmonious and delicious together. Concentration, we call it medium plus on the nose, medium plus on the, or medium on the palate, medium plus on the nose. So somewhere between medium plus is the intensity. Complexity, we had fruit, flower, violet, black fruit, touch of red fruit, fresh, high toned, ton of minerality. Nothing crazy, nothing secondary, nothing tertiary. So I'm gonna call that medium. And then finally the length, we call it medium plus. So we got balanced, we got medium to medium plus intensity, medium complexity, medium plus length. So when you take an average of all of that, I say we're landing somewhere between medium plus, but close to medium plus. So I'm gonna call this very good. Now, level of readiness for drinking and ageability. I think this wine is drinking beautifully right now. I love the freshness of it. I love the balance between the minerality and the fresh primary fruit right now. There's something really enjoyable and fresh and just kind of like hedonistically delicious to the body. In general, Brouilly is not meant to be aged for a very long time. This has low tannin. This has a medium acid, so the backbone is not all that great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It has a intensity, medium plus intensity on the nose, but we call it medium on the palate. So not super. I mean, it's decent intensity, some complexity, but really to me, what's enjoyable about this wine is the freshness of it, and having an okay backbone. It's just not meant to be aged for a long time. So I'd say drink this now, but I think this will be perfectly fine for the next, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. It's not going to fall apart. I don't think it's going to go past its prime, going all the way up to 5. You'll probably start to see some tertiary start to kick in around that time. But I don't know if that tertiary is necessarily going to make this wine better, per se. Because to me, what is beautiful about this wine is actually its freshness and youth. So, youthfulness. So, I'd say drink it over the next 2 to 3 years, but it will be just fine all the way up to 5 years, is what I would say. All right. That is the last recording of Beauj Box 2025. If you have any questions, disagreements, concerns, you know where to find me. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Friday, and I will see you for the last tasting, a live tasting on Zoom next Friday. When we taste Côte de Brouilly. So, cool. Toodles, everyone. Happy Friday.